The Great Steppe, millenniums of events, hundreds of nomadic tribes and people. They lived, worked, made discoveries, conquered large tracts of lands, and left us some mysteries. To learn more about it, watch the project called Enigma of the Great Steppe. Coming up today, East meets West, poet to Raz, with love to steppe, music revived in painting. Year 1865, Paris. In one of the popular salons, the fashionably dressed audience was applauding the gray-haired gentleman who was holding the recently released album. It was a luxurious edition in French. Each of its 22 reproductions was accompanied by the explanatory text. The author of the book, Life of the Kazakh Steppes, Bronislav Zalessky, is the very man with the help of which enlightened Europe got acquainted with Uli Dala. The author wrote, "I think the most valuable thing in my work is that all materials were gathered from the field, and all paintings and records are not the phantom of my imagination, but a reflection of real life." I think that such work is very interesting, at least with its novelty. As far as I know, no single European got acquainted with the artistic side of the region described by me, and they did not paint these landscapes. How did an educated, ambitious, and talented Polish nobleman get to the boundless steppes so far from his motherland? The Polish people arrived in Kazakhstan in the first half of the 19th century. Their appearance is connected with the national liberation movement of Poland, which, according to the Vienna Congress of the 1815, became part of Russia. The Polish people perceived the becoming part of the Russian Empire not only as a national oppression, but also as a backward movement. A Polish politician, Maurycy Mochnacki, once wrote, "The Poles revolt against the lenient foreign domination because they can, and against the severe because they should." Thus, the 18-year-old Bronislav, as a true son of his people, could not stay away from this movement. In modern terms, political intelligence worked very well, and the thought about the Polish liberation, which just arose, was suppressed immediately. Can you imagine the thought itself? And these brilliantly educated, talented Polish people from good families were deported. Zalessky also was arrested. He spent 2 years in prison. But he did not refuse his ideas and struggle. As a result, in 1848, Bronislav was exiled to Kazakhstan. And he was not the only one who was expelled. I have to say that time was associated with the phenomenon Orientalist boom. It is the period of the first movement of European people to the East. It is the period of the building of colonial European empires, and therefore the interest in the Eastern countries was combined with the movement of European culture, which we call Romanticism, which means love of the past and love of exoticism. Although he was sent to Orenburg as a simple soldier, Bronislav Zalessky had the rights and opportunities for career development. In 1853, he was awarded the non-commissioned officer for the capture of Akhmechet, former name of Kizlodar. He got this title in a very short time, despite the fact that he was considered as politically unreliable. But his companions in misfortune have served as soldiers for a long time. None of conquest can be done without intelligence activity. And in the second half of the 19th century, military and scientific research expeditions were carried out. The exiled Poles, being literate and educated people, of course, have contributed to this process. How did young Bronislav perceive the exile to Kazakhstan? As punishment, as beneficence, or as a special mission? Who was Zalessky? An artist, revolutionary, or intelligence? What did his paintings hide? How did his thorough nature help to revive the ancient Kazakh musical instrument? What is the value of poet in Russia? Did the oil painting grant the freedom? And how did poet Taras deceive the prison guards? Of course, there are no clear answers, but we will tell some of the versions. So Bronislaw Zalessky was not an artist in the broad terms. By the way, he himself admitted this. In the preface to his album, which was published in France, he wrote exactly about it. My paintings may not be so highly artistic, but they are drawn from the field, and they convey the specific nature, edge, and atmosphere of that place. Mainly, he depicted the nature. Being uprooted from his motherland, devoid of the benefits of the nobleman, Zalessky was not in state of despair for long. The young Polish man began to study the Kazakh language in the very land where he was sent, not by his choice. He fixed everything he saw with enthusiasm and punctuality of the scientist. His paintings, The Sacred Tree of Kazakhs, Akhtal Mountain Range, The Tomb of the Kazakh Saint, still amazed at their realistic nature. The Orientalist Vasily Grigoriev wrote about Zalessky's paintings the following. The pencil and burin of Zalessky represent the boundless desert plains with amazing accuracy. Of course, there were exceptions. So, in his comments, Bronislaw called the steppe flora kingdom and camel the king of the steppe. The voice of camel sounds sonorous and majestic, like the sound of a church pipe organ. It is the steppe pipe organ, power of which harmonizes with the boundless steppes and fills the mind with some solemn thoughts. But Zalessky was meticulous rather than romantic. And perhaps the accuracy of the objects or terrain images was reflected not only with the help of the artistic peculiarities of his style. Middle Asia, with its rich mineral wealth, was the center of geopolitical interest of many powerful states. Maybe there are sketches in the European archives which were not aimed at the general public, but it is just an assumption. It is known that Zalessky, being in Paris, dealt with problems of weapons and weapon collections. In addition, he led all Polish educational organizations in France. It is interesting that after decades, the ancient Kazakh musical instruments sounded again thanks to his meticulousness and realistic nature of his paintings. We will tell about that later. The exiled Polish nobleman was one of the participants of the Karatau expedition. Bronislaw, unlike many Europeans, has never shown superiority over the local population. He described the Kazakhs he met on Mangelschlag. Their faces are chapped and sun-tanned. They speak loud like the sailors who talk with each other in the storm and hurricane. Zalessky made comparisons like the poet. During the expedition on the inhospitable peninsula, Bronislaw Zalessky met a man with whom they became true friends. They went through all those years and all of those milestones together. He met Taras Shevchenko, who later wrote, "Without you, I feel myself as an orphan in the uninhabited Orenburg region." Each person has his own destiny. His road lies before him. This one builds up, that one tears down. Another casts greedy eyes over the earth to find somewhere, a land not yet enslaved, which he could conquer and then bear with him into the grave. These lines seem to be innocuous, but they played a fatal role in the destiny of the poet and painter. The meticulous chief of the third branch of the chancellery of His Imperial Majesty, Knyaz Alexei Orlov, noticed signs of sedition. And as a result, in May 30th, 1847, an ordinary soldier, Taras Shevchenko, arrived in the Orenburg Corps. Many people of the capital already knew his name. He was known as a talented artist and writer, but now he was just a trooper.
Надо помнить, что он родился в семье крепостного крестьянина.
It should be remembered that he was born in the family of a serf farmer, who is a serf in the Russian Empire. It is a weak-willed man, and who is a talented serf. It is a man who is condemned to a life of suffering. The childhood of Taras was in continuous hardship. He wandered and wandered with these fresco painters.
маленького Тараса, он ушел бродяжничать, и он ходил вместе с этими иконописцами.
The sexton taught him some literacy, and the pilgrims acquainted the boy with the simplest rules of drawing. At the age of 16, Taras started to serve at the house of the retired colonel, Pavel Engelgart. Later, in 1833, he painted this colonel's portrait. By the way, it is Shevchenko's first famous watercolor work.
Тарас Шевченко обращает на себя внимание великих русских художников.
Taras Shevchenko drew the attention of great Russian artists like Venetzianov, Brulov, and others. They were interested in him as an artist, not even as a poet, but as an artist, and they started to struggle to free him. 2,500 rubles were paid for freedom of the serf Shevchenko. It is a huge amount of money.
Это огромная сумма.
This was the price of freedom, the famous future poet and artist. Later, he studied at the Academy of Arts. He was eager to work, he wrote and drew. He was making up for lost time. But
Он вступил в вот это вот Кирилло-Мефодиевское политическое образование. Оно было, конечно,
he entered the brotherhood of Saints Cyril and Methodius. Of course, it was anti-serf and against authorities. It was the epoch of the Emperor Nicholas I of Russia. You know that he had the experience of Decembrist revolt, and he eliminated every manifestation of free thoughts.
Наученный опытом декабризма, душил всякое проявление вольнодумства.
The police found a collection of poems, 3 years, the content of which angered the representatives of the authorities. Shevchenko was arrested in Kiev and sent to St. Petersburg under escort.
Это такая сложная, но такая трагедия.
He had a very difficult and tragic fate. It was just like out of the frying pan into the fire. The serf boy was wandering and studying as best as he could. Then famous painters paid for his freedom, and he got into this environment and started studying. It was his luck.
Но вот эти
But whether it was good or bad, he had freedom-loving spirit. And he entered this society, and his life changed drastically. The punishment was swift and cruel. Yes, Taras was not executed or exiled to Siberia. He was just sent to serve in the troops.
Но самым страшным предписанием
But the most terrible order was the personal order of the emperor, the prohibition to write and draw.
О запрете писать и рисовать.
This was the most terrible sentence for the thinking, creative man. Petitions of the patrons did not help, and in the summer, Shevchenko was exiled to a separate Orenburg corps. He did not like this little town. At first glance, it seems that there is something antipathetic in Orenburg. But sometimes the first opinion can be deceptive, and it would be better if I do not write about it until I take a closer look at it. Thanks to admirers of talent, Taras got the right to write, but only letters. His message to Varvara Repnina was full of pain. It's sad, it is very sad, and with all this grief, I am strictly forbidden to draw anything. And here are so much new things. The Kyrgyz steppe is so picturesque. People are so original and naive. I just want to take a pencil and draw. To watch and not to draw is torment that only a true artist can understand. Fortunately, there were many far-sighted people among the officials. They decided to use Taras Shevchenko's talent for the benefit of the Tsar and the fatherland.
Шевченко пригласили в экспедицию по Аралу. И там он...
Shevchenko was invited to the expedition along the Aral Sea. And there he had to do some sketching. And the task was to paint landscapes, that is to draw surrounding nature, and of course, folk types. What does folk type mean? It is the local population. Taras Shevchenko left valuable fine arts heritage for Kazakhstan.
Изобразительное наследие оставил для Казахстана.
At that time, there were no images of the Kazakhs even in Russia, to say nothing about Europe. Sketches of Taras Shevchenko, Happy Catcher, boy playing with a cat, Bai Gushi, Kazakh lady Katya are real portraits. They're filled with some kind of light and charm, although at first glance it is clear that all these people were poor and had a thorny fate. But they are beautiful, and we look into their faces again and again and catch their glance. The artist showed it with profound compassion and warmth.
Если говорить о литературной части творчества, то написано было в Казахстане.
Speaking about the literary part of creativity, Taraz wrote about 100 poems in Kazakhstan, in Orenburg, and later on Mongol Shlak Peninsula. Different novels were written. There were a lot of them, but only 9 novels survived, including The Twins. This novel describes the life of Kazakhs in details.
Там, допустим, близнецы и так далее. В них вот вкрапления такие, описания быта казахов, очень подробные.
He compared the Kyrgyz with biblical Jews and Aksakal patriarchs, elder men, with Abraham. He interestingly described the ritual baranta, misspelled word of barimta, cattle theft and revenge for the similar act. The expedition during which Shevchenko was officially allowed to paint was over. And soon a new one was planned to the Karatau Mountains, perhaps longer and more fruitful one.
Но тут случилось совершенно непредвиденное и неожиданное. Ведь распоряжение не рисовать.
But at that time, completely unexpected situation happened. The order not to draw and not to write, which was given by the emperor, was violated. And it was violated by the fact that Taras Shevchenko took part in the expedition to the Aral Sea for the very purpose of drawing. This was a violation of the highest command. Of course, the governor and all those who petitioned were punished. Someone wrote the denunciation, as it always happens.
Понесли наказание. Как всегда, знаете, нашелся человек, который доложил.
And Shevchenko was sent further to the Aktau steppes. He had no communication, no friends, but only a silent steppe, which was like a giant white tablecloth and a holy tree covered with multicolored fabric cuts. Taraz was as lonely as that tree. Who knows what poems he wanted to write, what pictures he painted in his imagination, spending hours in the shadow of that tree. Perhaps here he conceived the idea of writing a 4-volume moral historical novel in which he wanted to depict customs, rituals, and history of the Orthodox people in microscopic details. Anyway, after some time, everything was changed, and in 1857, Shevchenko left the steppe. He wrote to his friends, including Bronislav Zalessky, till the last days of his life. The contribution of these people, as well as dozens of other convicts in the culture of the Kazakh people, is difficult to overestimate. Thus, with the help of Zalessky's painting, the ancient musical instrument, which was in oblivion, was returned back to the national treasury of the Kazakhs.
Один из интересных рисунков Залесского в кибитке заинтересовал.
The researcher of the Kazakh musical instruments, Bulat Saribayev, was interested in one of the touching paintings of Zalessky called In the Tent. The fate of the musical instrument sherter is closely connected with this work. Sherter, which was known only by descriptions, is depicted on this painting. Moreover, one man is playing on the sherter, and the second young man is dancing.
Он играет на шертере, а еще второй молодой мужчина танцует.
Thus, PhD in art criticism, Bulat Saribayev, having thoroughly studied all traditions in which sherter was mentioned, and then seeing the painting, recreated this unique instrument. Perhaps we still have many discoveries ahead of us. It turns out that the only one, Zalessky's paintings, provided scientists of the 20th century new insights into the life of the Kazakhs. And nevertheless, we would like to note that it is not entirely true when some researchers call Zalessky as the first man who acquainted Europeans with the Kazakhs. After all, he was not a pioneer in this. Earlier, his compatriot had already visited the Great Steppe. They have rounded houses skillfully made of sticks in the form of a tent. but on the top of their houses, right in the middle, there is a hole for the daylight penetration. Smoke comes out of this hole as there is a fire inside the tent. The walls and doors are covered with felt. Some of these houses can be easily dismantled and reassembled, and they are transported on the backs of animals. Wherever the nomads go to war or just change the place of stay, they take their huts with them. They have large numbers of livestock such as camels, oxen, sheep, and goats. They believe that they have more stallions and mares than the rest of the people in the world. This is a free translation of the records of Benedict of Poland. The document dates back to the 13th century. Benedict was a friar and one of the participants of the expedition to Central Asia sent by Pope Innocent IV. The European rulers wanted to understand how the invincible Golden Horde army appeared in the wild lands. They shoot arrows, but we're not able to do the same. Their arrows block out the light. The enemy is following us. These are lines written at those times by the unknown poet Goliard. It is better to try to establish diplomatic relations with such an enemy, as entering the battle was more trouble, so they tried to establish as well as they could. Much later, Zalessky's contemporaries participated in the national liberation movement under the leadership of Kensari Khan.
Сохранились документы.
There are some documents in the Orenburg archive and funds confirming the participation of the Poles in the liberation movement led by Kensari Kasimov. It is mentioned that 100 Poles left their place of settlement and joined the rebellion of Kensari Kasimov. Personally, I did not investigate this, and our historians were not interested in this. I don't know why. But I know one thing, that one of the advisors of Kensari Kasimov was Pole Joseph Herbrut. By the way, Elias Yesin Berlin wrote about him in his remarkable novel, Kahar. The bravery of the men riders and the experience of the Polish officers allowed the army of Kensari to defeat enemies one by one. But the legendary Khan died soon, and one steppe Jirao composed the sad song. Stones cry out, sun go down, steep cliffs fall down. Cheerful melody of the stream, please be silent. The messenger of the heaven, Kensari, is gone. He is dead. At the Institute of Language and Literature in Almaty, there are lyrics which were dedicated to Kensari by Joseph Herbrut. By the way, it is during the liberation movement of Kensari, Kustau Zielinski wrote the poem, The Kyrgyz, the first great poem about the Kazakhs in the world literature. And of course, talking about the Poles in Kazakhstan, we should mention one more name.
Казахская поэтесса
The Kazakh poetess Jazik dedicated one poem to Adolf Yanushkevich. She wrote that he was not like our officials. He was Bilek. This means he was a Pole. So, for this poetess, the ethnic origin of this man was identical with his morality. He was a nobleman who studied in Europe, and he was also exiled to the Kazakh steppes. In his book, Diaries and Letters from Journey Through the Kazakh Steppes, there are many colorful pictures illustrating the lifestyle of the Kazakhs. He was familiar with the father of the great poet Abai, and in his notes he wrote, "None of Bai's rich people are worthy to untie the laces of Kunanbai's shoes." Yanushkevich was a highly educated, intelligent person, and he looked not only to the outer side of the Kazakh people's life, he also studied their spiritual life. And here, Yanushkevich highly valued the traditional Kazakh court of bees, rulers. This was a special kind of arts. He compared the steppe judges with the speakers of ancient Greece or Rome and emphasized that all their performances were improvised. They did not get prepared in advance. They did not have prepared speeches on papers. In the letter sent to his brother, Januarius Adolf Yanushkevich wrote a phrase that became prophetic. For example, Akmola is the future capital of the whole steppe. The friendship between the Poles and Kazakhs lasts for centuries. These two people are different in anthropological features, religious beliefs, and lifestyle. They live on different sides of the Ural Mountains. And why are they so similar on the mental level? That is a question for historians. ideologists, and ethnographers.